Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going over UFC Fight Island 1. Technically, it's the second fight they have on Fight Island, but that was UFC 251. So now they're calling it UFC Fight Island 1. It's going to be headlined by Kattar versus Dan Ige, which is a pivotal featherweight bout that I'm very much looking forward to. There's a couple other fights intriguingly sprinkled out throughout the card. Another one that just comes off the top of my head is Cody Stamann versus Jimmie Rivera, which should be a fun fight. Both guys going up to 145 due to the short nature of this fight being put together, but it's a very intriguing fight that I can't wait to break down for you guys. Before we get into the card, though, let's do a quick betting recap of my UFC 251 card. I'll try to get through this quickly so that we can just get right into the actual breakdowns. But let's start off with the lock of the night play. Actually, you know what? Let's start off with the one play that missed for us. It was a dog of the night play. I had one unit at plus 181 on Jose Aldo to go out there and beat Petr Yan. I thought he still looked good. You know, the same question marks that remain for Jose Aldo, as they always have pretty much for his entirety of his career, was the length of how long his gas tank can go, and it really caught up to him in that fifth round against Petr Yan. You know, there were spots where Yan looked great, and then Jose Aldo came in, started to look great, and then Yan took back over again. It was a really great fight, a very fun fight, and then unfortunately he ate way too many shots in that fifth round before referee Leon Roberts finally decided to step in. But I thought I got decent value off that plus 181 on Jose Aldo. I still believe he's there. Petr Yan is just another level right now. But I still think that Jose Aldo could compete with the top 5 of the bantamweight division. And there's a ton of fights that I'm still very excited for him to be a part of. One of them just being off the top of my head, Cody Garbrandt. I would love to see Cody Garbrandt versus Jose Aldo. I think that would be a phenomenal fight. So minus 1 unit there, but then it was winning for the rest of the night. We had 2 units on Rose Namajunas at minus 193. That hits for 1.04 units of profit. Pretty much what I expected it to be, other than the fact that Jessica Andrade went to absolute apeshit in round 3. You know, it could have been close to a 10-8, but Rose Namajunas was still in that fight and still in that round. She was still landing damage in that round. She wasn't a complete, you know, she didn't completely just roll over for Jessica Andrade in the round. But, you know, we saw what made Rose great. Pinpoint accuracy, in and out movement, outside of, you know, getting dropped and hurt by Jessica Andrade in that third round. She looked pretty good. So I was happy to cash on that. Also, 2 units at minus 196 on Alexander Volkanovski. That profits for 1.02 units. I haven't watched that fight back yet. Watching it live, again, probably a little bit stoned and a little bit out of it after just, you know, having a fun night. I'll just leave it at that. It's tough to score it, but watching it live, I did have it for Max Holloway rounds 1, 2, and 3. However, we're not going to be doing the deciding splits episode until after this Wednesday card, so we probably will do at least round 3 of Volkanovski Holloway, and then I'll see if, you know, my memory serves me correctly in terms of I scored that fight for Max Holloway. But regardless, I'll take the judge's gaff on this and take the money that Alexander Volkanovski won. And yeah, I'm happy with that. And then lastly, we had the lock of the night play. I totally fucked up the line movement on this bet. I thought that, you know, minus 267 was going to be the best that we got for Kamaru, but people were drinking the Kool-Aid way too much on Masvidal a day or two after I placed the bet. I saw the line get down to minus 225, minus 230. Absolutely ridiculous. I was so close to putting another 5 units on Kamaru Usman at that minus 230 line, but I just thought that was very irresponsible bankroll management. So I just stayed with the 5 units at minus 267 that I had, plus 1.87 units on that play. Very happy with that. I'm glad to finally shut these people up who are riding Jorge Masvidal's nuts and thinking that he would go out there and beat Kamaru Usman. Like, come on, guys, get your shit together. Anybody that bet Jorge Masvidal should get slapped in the mouth. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that's a little bit too forward. I'm absolutely sorry. But skill for skill, Kamaru Usman blows him out of the water. Even if it's boring, it's within the rules of MMA. Don't care if it put you to sleep. A win is a win is a win is a win. And I don't give a fuck if it was just stomping his feet. He controlled him for the majority of that fight. If anything, you give Jorge Masvidal round 1. outside of that, clean sweep for Mr. Kamaru Usman. So happy to cash on that lock that I play. It gets us back on track a little bit, but that brings us right into UFC Fight Island 1, which again, two intriguing matchups, including the main event and the Rivera and Stamann fight that I was talking about earlier. I'm intrigued to see what Taila Santos looks like after coming off her first professional career loss. The return of Abdul, Razak, Alhassan. That's a great fight. Ricardo Ramos versus Lerone Murphy is a great fight too. Jack Shore slowly working his way back up into the ranks. Looking forward to that. So decent fights sprinkled out throughout the card. Entertaining fights nonetheless. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. So before we get into the breakdowns, again, I always want to remind you guys that these breakdowns come out early on Patreon. So if you guys want to hop on that, I got all the information in the description of the video or the podcast below. So make sure you guys check that out. $5 a month, you get all this shit earlier than everybody else. As I record them, I drop them to you guys so you guys can see them. And then I have a bunch of other perks that you guys can check out as well too on the Patreon. So check that out. Yeah, I put a lot of hard work into this shit. So, it's just a little bit of gratitude that I'm looking for. That's all. Anyway, let's get into the breakdowns for UFC Fight Island 1. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Kenneth Bergh versus Jorge Gonzalez. There are currently no odds on this fight as Jorge Gonzalez stepped in just a couple of days ago in place of another UFC newcomer. I think his name was Timu Fucht. But Kenneth Bergh, we'll start off with him. Was on the Contender Series, I believe it was last year, in 2019, July of 2019, he lost via neck crank in the first round to Antonio Trocoli, who a couple months later ended up testing positive for that fight, and that fight ended up getting overturned to a no contest. So, Kenneth Bergh still has relatively an unblemished record still, but he's obviously making his UFC debut here. He's coming off of 2 straight victories after that Contender Series fight as well, but against guys that are, not really competitive. One guy was making his UFC debut, or not his UFC, but his pro MMA debut, and got just absolutely bum rushed. Got taken down quite easily and then got rear naked choked within 41 seconds. And then the fight after that, he fought some guy that was 14-19 going into that fight, dropped him immediately and then ground and pounded him within 21 seconds and got the victory that way too. So it's tough to tell what Kenneth Bergh is really like when he's fighting guys that are actually legitimate. He has a decent win over Norman Perezli from Cage Warriors, where he guillotine choked him in the second round. But it seems pretty evident in terms of what Kenneth Bergh wants to do. It's get you down. Once he gets you down, he seems to have a pretty clear path to victory, which is like going for submissions or going for ground and pound. But this fight against Jorge Gonzalez is quite a bit of an unknown too. He has a lot of fights under his record. This is going to be his 21st fight coming into the UFC. He just fought on July 3rd, so he fought just about a week ago at UWC 22. Luckily, when I was putting the tape index together, they were literally premiering the event video on YouTube, and then as soon as I finished up, I was able to put it into the index. But we saw him, another guy. The guy he was fighting was 8-0-1, but did not look like an 8-0-1er. He ate a couple shots. Jorge was eventually able to get him down within a minute, and then got the rear naked choke. It didn't seem like he had much resistance to deal with that time around. Both of these guys are a little bit of an unknown. I think Gonzalez obviously has a little bit more legitimacy just due to his experience. He knocked out Luke Barnett back at the beginning of 2019. Beautiful right hook that he was able to get off of an exit and then follow up with a little bit of ground and pound. So he has power in his hands, and I believe that was the first time he had actually gotten out of the first round when he had fought Nasruddinov, which was the fight after Luke Barnett. And that was a fight where we saw, he's not the quickest fighter. Nasruddinov was able to really get a lot of shots off and hurt Jorge, just due to the lack of speed that Jorge was, showcasing. I don't think that he's going to have to worry too much about Bergh's speed. I don't think Bergh is the fastest fighter either. So this fight is a little bit of an unknown. The one thing that I am intrigued by would be the under 1.5. I expect it to be completely juiced though, because both guys are finishers. In 16 fights, or the fight before the Nasruddinov fight, Jorge was 15-3 going into that fight, and that was the first time he had ever seen the second round, which was insane. To go 18 fights without seeing the second round is insane. But we did see a little bit of his gas tank start to show in that second round, which led to the finish by Nasruddinov. He was able to overwhelm him, got the back mount, and was able to rain down shots and finally get that finish. But if this fight gets into the second round, things could get very dicey for him. So I'm not the most intrigued by picking a side here, but more so I'm down with taking the under. Normally, you guys know me, I like to wait until a fighter is at like 2.5 or the total is at 2.5 before betting an under, but I'm okay with betting the under 1.5 here, which is what I fully expect them to drop this at. Jorge is obviously in fight condition still. He just had a fight, again, 12 days before this fight's actually going to take place. But there's going to be a lot that he has to deal with in the interim. He has to take all of his COVID tests. He's going to have to make the trek out to Abu Dhabi. All these things are going to be very new for him, just as it is going to be for Kenneth Bergh. But Bergh has been preparing for this for slightly longer. I think I'm going to have to side with Jorge here. I think he'll be okay if this fight does get taken to the ground. The only thing is, it seems like Bergh is going to be the bigger guy here too. I just want to confirm the sizes. We got 6 foot for Jorge Gonzalez and 6'2", 74.5 inches for Kenneth Bergh. Bergh looks like he's going to be the bigger guy, so it might be a little bit easier for him to get this fight to the ground. But it's going to be all about whether he's going to be able to control it from there or not. I'm not completely sold on either guy. Just for the sake of this podcast, I will side. I'm going to have to side with Jorge Gonzalez here. I could see him hurting Kenneth on the feet. But again, he also has a ton of experience under his belt. But man, I wouldn't side with either guy here, but for the sake of the podcast, I'll go with Gonzalez, but the under 1.5 is probably where your money should be. Again, we don't have odds out yet, but I'm assuming it will be at 1.5, and it'll probably be like -150, -160, and I'm totally okay with that considering the track record of both of these guys. So I'll go with Gonzalez to win by first round TKO, but the under 1.5 is what you should keep your eye on. Aaron Phillips versus Jack Shore. We got -700 for Jack Shore, +500 for Aaron Phillips. And the line that's most intriguing to me here is actually the over 1.5. It's currently at -120, and it makes a lot of sense. So with Jack Shore, he's coming over, this will be his second UFC fight. His first one he won via rear naked choke over Nohelen Hernandez in round 3. And if you notice earlier in his career, he's still quite young in his career. He's 12-0 currently. But the first half of his career is mainly really quick first-round finishes. He goes out there, pretty much just looks for the submission and the finish right away. And he, more often than not, he would get them back then. But as of late, his last 3 fights in particular have come to a finish in the 3rd round, and that kind of shows a little bit of maturity in his game in terms of looking for the spots, being patient, knowing that the spots are eventually going to be there, and it's more so just waiting for the pieces to fall into place so that he can get the rear naked choke, which are 2 of his last finishes, or whether it's the ground and pound afterwards. But he's very talented. I think he has a bunch of potential. Whereas Aaron Phillips on the other side is actually a former UFC vet. He fought twice in the UFC when he lost to Sam Sicilia and Matt Holbar via decision. And then he fought Chris Gutierrez in 2015 and lost via injury. It was some sort of leg injury. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but that pretty much put him out of pro MMA competition for about 3 years. And since then, he's come back and won 5 straight fights. His Devontae Sewell fight was very intriguing because I thought there was a good argument that he probably lost that fight. Sewell did a really good job of getting on top, landing some good shots from on top, and continuously making Aaron Phillips work. But somehow Phillips still ended up getting the victory in that fight. The one thing Phillips did show that was promising was that he can defend pretty well off of his back, but he has a little bit of an issue in terms of getting back to his feet, and I think he'll have the same issues against Jack Shore, who I believe is the much stronger fighter with the better top game, better jiu-jitsu. Phillips will probably have the advantage on the feet. It's funny because, he trains out of a gym called Head Kicks MMA and Fitness. I believe that's his gym. Not to mention alone that his Instagram is at headkicks_MMA. So you pretty much know what he's looking for. He's going to go out there, try to take your head off pretty much with his leg. So, but the thing is, with those kicks, whenever you are kicking, you're giving your opponent an in terms of getting the fight to the ground. And I don't think that Phillips is going to want to throw many kicks, but I don't think it's going to matter because I think Jack Shore does a good job of staying patient on the feet and then waiting for the right opportunity to clinch up and get fights to the ground. And something that Phillips has shown as of late is that he doesn't have the best takedown defense, so it's going to be a little bit easy for Jack Shore to really close the distance, clasp his hands behind Phillips, and get this fight to the ground. Initially, I was thinking the under 1.5 is probably the way to go, just because of how easy it is for Phillips to get taken down. But with Shore, again, his maturity, I believe he really is going to be a little bit patient. We will see a little bit of resistance from Phillips from the bottom, which should allow this fight to go over 7.5 minutes. And once it gets to that point, I think Shore is slowly going to take over, and then we'll see the spots open up for him. But I think the over is probably where the best bet is here at minus 120. I think there's a ton of value there considering how slow and methodical Jack Shore is nowadays with his grappling and his jiu-jitsu. So unfortunate return for Aaron Phillips in terms of going up against a tank like Jack Shore, but at least this is probably his hazing to get back into the UFC, and I'm sure they'll give him a little bit more of a favorable matchup next time around, so he's not a plus 500 underdog coming back into the UFC. So I'm taking Jack Shore to win this fight, probably by second or third round submission or TKO. The guy's a tank. He has a ton of potential, and I can't wait to see him go out there and do some more work. So once again, second or third round TKO or submission for Jack Shore. Diana Belbita versus Liana Jojua. We got minus 165 for Belbita, plus 145 for Liana. This is a intriguing fight. Both women aren't the highest of level skill-wise. Diana likes to really go for the kill in most of her fights. She's a very forward-moving fighter, likes to open up with her strikes, likes to use kicks as well too, but she's more of a rushing type of an opponent, which is why Molly McCann was able to get her down more often than not, because Diana just pretty much allowed her to capitalize on those striking exchanges, because the takedown was there and it was pretty open for her. If she tightens that up a little bit, she could definitely put a hurting on some women, because her striking and her aggression is quite impressive, I should say. But it's pretty obvious what she wants to do. She wants to go in there and try to knock your head off, and she throws punches and bunches. Doesn't seem like she has crazy knockout power or anything like that, but it's just her overwhelming pressure and pace that seems to break a lot of these women. She kind of has a similar skepticism about her regarding her pre-UFC, competition. A lot of these women, less than 5 or 6 fights. She has racked up a couple losses on her record. And most of those losses seem to come when she's fighting women that look to take her down. And it doesn't look like it's the hardest thing to get her down either. One of her, I'd say her third last fight against Milena Bojic. This was a woman, making her pro MMA debut. She was getting lit up on the feet pretty much. Sorry, I did get that wrong. It was Anna Maria Paul, actually. Did I get that wrong? Hold on, let me check that back real quick. Yeah, I believe it was Anna Maria Paul. either way, this was a fight where, you know, the woman was pretty much getting teed up off on the feet. Liana was having a lot of success there, but whenever she wanted to get this fight to the ground, she had pretty much, you know, all the ease in the world. She was able to get her down. She didn't do as much damage from there, and Liana was able to capitalize with that. But when women are able to get her down, the one that really comes to mind is her Ione fight in Superior FC. That was her last loss before coming to the UFC. The girl seemed to, you know, get her down with relative ease, and then when she was finally able to, you know, she locked up a guillotine choke and had it pretty deep and got the finish there. I think if Liana was smart, it's funny that it's Diana versus Liana, but Liana, let's say, you know what, I'll go with the last names just so it's a little bit easier and I don't get these girls mixed up. But Jojua, if she's smart, I believe her best path to victory here would be to capitalize on takedown opportunities, get this fight to the ground and ride up on top, as I believe that Belbita has a little bit of issues in terms of getting up, and she's not the most active off of her back with submissions or anything like that, and Liana does a really good job of staying out of submissions. But you know, if Jojua has a little bit more confidence in her striking, that might just be bad news for her. I think that she would let this fight slip away, you know, trying to go strike for strike with Belbita, because it seems like Belbita would have the activity and the output advantage. Both girls are, again, they're, you know, average level for this division. It could go either way, which is why I believe this is more so like a dog or pass situation. And I'm a fan of Belbita. She actually trains in Ontario at House of Champions with Cruel Lin, who's a great Muay Thai coach. He's coached a ton of local MMA fighters, most notably Kyle Nelson, who goes down there every now and then to get some training in with Cruel Lin. And Liana, it seems that she made that move over to her to House of Champions after her RXF fights, which is something that Cruel Lin is also very much tied to as well. Cruel Lin is also another guy that you guys will notice. He's, whenever they normally have Canadian events, he's normally the cut man. So you'll see his name on the back of his shirt, but he's a really high-level Muay Thai coach as well as an MMA coach. He has a ton of champions, hence the name of House of Champions. Maybe not in the UFC, but you know, all over the world, regional promotions, Muay Thai promotions. He's produced a lot of winners. Man, I just don't know which way to go. It's just so, the only thing that has me hesitant about you know, fully being confident in Belbita is just her lack of takedown defense. You know, she does have the slight experience advantage here against Liana, but Liana has gone a full 5 rounds at Fight Nights Global, where she wanted a majority decision. Man, it's tough. And then in the Sarah Moraes fight, she pretty much just got held up against the cage, finally got taken down and pretty much TKO'd. Man, it's really tough to pick this fight. I got to give the striking advantage to Belbita, the grappling advantage to Jojua. And you guys know me, I normally like to go with the grappler in these situations, and the fact that you're giving me dog money on her as well too, I think this is more so a dog or pass situation. It's tough to find a reason to play minus 165 on Belbita, who, you know, has a glaring flaw in her game, but it's going to come down to the fight IQ of Jojua, knowing whether she will have much more success if this fight gets taken to the ground. And she might have a little bit of a strength advantage here too. She's you know, quite strong, and we've seen you know, good awareness on the ground from her when she has gotten fights to the ground. So I believe I'm going to have to go with Jojua here. I think that she'll grind this fight out from the top position, maybe look for submissions, but she can't get too overzealous, give up positions to allow Belbita to get back to their feet. But man, the line should be much closer, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen from both women. Yeah, I'll go with Jojua to win this fight by decision, but if you really, you know, I would say just don't bet this fight. It could go either way, but if you do and you want to put a gun to your head or something like that, you got to go with the dog here just to get that little extra bit of value, which I believe Jojua has. So I'm going to go with Jojua to win this fight by decision, but just pass on this fight, please. Just pass on it. Chris Fishgold versus Jared Gordon. We got minus 145 on Flash, and we got plus 125 on Fishgold. The one line that stands out to me here is actually the under 2.5 at minus 140. A little bit juicy, but I don't mind it. So let's start off with Jared Gordon. He's coming off a loss to the ever-streaking Charles Oliveira. That was back in November, and now here he is back fighting in... pretty much, what was that, 8-9 months later. One thing that he's really known for is his cardio and his pace. He's always putting pressure on his opponents, always staying in their face, not really letting them breathe, and that really disrupts, the game plan of most of his opponents. Obviously, the Joaquim Silva loss was very devastating. That was a fight where, Joaquim Silva, just being the better technical striker, was having a lot of success on the feet, and then eventually he was able to get the knockout there. And then Diego Ferreira obviously had a lot of power and was able to put him away within 2 minutes of that first round. In the Dan Moret fight, we saw Jared Gordon really kind of easily get taken down by Moret. And Moret's a bigger dude, kind of taller for the weight class, and it seemed like he had a bit of a strength advantage as well. So it made it, a little bit easier for him to get him to the ground. But once he got him to the ground, he found it really difficult to keep Jared Gordon there. Gordon was always finding ways to, find reversals, find sweeps, get his, regain top position, stay out of submissions. There's a ton of submissions that Dan Moret was threatening, arm bars, triangles, all that stuff, but Jared Gordon did a good job of continuously working, pitter-patter punches from the top, but also staying out of those submissions, so that was very impressive. And then obviously we know the Charles Oliveira fight, took a really bad shot there by Oliveira on the inside, dropped him, and then he ate a perfect uppercut as well to really put him out. Very unfortunate loss from there. He came in as a huge underdog as well too, so it's not like we're expecting him to go out there and actually absolutely starch Charles. A loss is a loss, and that's a high level opponent to lose to. Now here he is against Chris Fishgold. Fishgold has run into a little bit of trouble in the UFC. He came into the UFC 17-1-1. Now he's sitting at a record of 18-3-1. He's lost 2 out of his last 3 fights. His only victory being over Daniel Tamor, who probably wasn't even UFC ready anyway. But losses to Calvin Kattar, obviously Kattar's headlining the card, obviously the way better striker, and he was able to keep the fight on the feet for the majority of it and was able to knock him out there. And then Makwan Amirkhani, he had a little bit of success there. Makwan had a great takedown, great timing in that first round, and then it was the second round where, Fishgold, with some questionable fight IQ, going for a guillotine, gives up the position on the ground, and then Makwan wraps up an anaconda choke and gets the victory there. Fishgold's a very strong grappler, a very strong wrestler, but his only issue is that he seems to have a little bit of gas tank issues. He has gone 5 rounds in the Cage Warriors, but that was a fight where he was able to easily get his opponent down round after round after round, and then just ride off top control, just staying just active enough so that the referee doesn't stand them up. But he's going to have a lot of issues trying to keep Jared Gordon down. I think he'll be able to get Jared Gordon down. I think that he'll have a little bit of success in that first round. But if he's not able to get that submission in the first round, which is something that he's kind of known for, it's going to be a tough night for him. And I think that Jared Gordon could absolutely overwhelm him and really get a TKO later in the fight. So that's why I'm a little bit intrigued by the under 2.5. And if you guys have been following me for a little bit, you guys know that I did have an under 1.5 kind of bite me in the butt a couple weeks ago with Jillian Robertson and Courtney Casey. I went hard on that under 2.5, and then it ended up cashing a minute after the under 2.5 went by. So maybe the fight doesn't go to decision is the way to go. But the thing is, you guys know my style. I either like taking straight bets or money line or totals, just because those are the odds that are most widely available to people that actually watch this show. So the under 2.5 is definitely something that I would consider, just because I believe that Jared Gordon will really start to come on after that first round. But I'm not 100% sure if he'll be able to get it within the under 2.5. But I do like him in this fight. My only concern is that first round. Is Jared Gordon going to be able to stay out of the positions of or the submissions of Fishgold? Fishgold is much stronger than Dan Moret. He does have the slightly better wrestling, but his striking game is very one-dimensional. You know, he has that, Fishgold has that like wrestler style striking, as I like to call it, where it's just blitzing right hands, power hooks, and then it's just to close the distance so that he can clinch up or shoot for a takedown. He's going to have to be a little bit better than that with Jared Gordon, because I think Gordon will do a good job of staying off the cage and be able to, you know, stay away from most of the takedowns. I do believe that Fishgold will get the takedown in the first round. And if he's not able to lock up the submission within that first round, again, it's going to be very, very tough for him to get the victory here, because Flash just has a ridiculous gas tank, a ridiculous pace. And I think, again, if this fight gets past that first round, it's going to be all Jared Gordon. So this is a really good live betting opportunity. So if you want to sit back and just wait, see how that first round plays out, and then really, you know, jump on Jared Gordon, probably after, you know, being down after one round, you might be able to get some good plus money on him there. But I like Gordon to get this fight done late or get the finish late. I'm just a little bit hesitant about the under 2.5 again. I don't know if it's going to take him longer than that. I could see him getting it done in the second round too, but I'm just a little bit hesitant. So I do like Jared Gordon here. I'm going to take him to win this fight by third round TKO, as I think he's just going to overwhelm Fishgold a little bit too much. Fishgold is going to be shooting for his life after that first round, and I think Gordon just does a good enough job in terms of, you know, one, getting reversals, getting sweeps, and getting back to his feet, which will make Fishgold work even more. And then we see his gas tank really start to fail him, and the pace and pressure of Gordon really, you know, take it out of Fishgold. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Gordon here to win this fight by third round TKO. But under 2.5 is something you might want to consider. But yeah, I like Gordon, third round TKO. Ricardo Ramos versus Lerone Murphy. We got minus 155 on Ramos and plus 135 on Lerone Murphy. Let's start off with Lerone Murphy. He's coming off a draw in a fight against Zubaira Tukhugov back at UFC 242, which was a pretty back and forth fight in terms of, you know, Zubaira had him on the ropes in the first round, and then I believe one of the judges saw that as a 10-8 and then gave Murphy the last two rounds as a pretty much 10-9 each. But it was a split draw. All three judges had the scorecards completely different. But yeah, it was just such a weird fight. And you could just see how the temperature affected both guys in there too. With the fight happening in Abu Dhabi, they always have this like weird temperature situation, and these guys are just absolutely drenched halfway through the first round just due to their sweat and the humidity in the arena. But you know, that was a good way for Lerone Murphy to really, you know, get into the UFC, a good fight to make his debut against a tested Zubaira Tukhugov who had tons of experience within the UFC, and he was really able to show off some of his striking skills, which is his main, you know, attributes or his best skill that he has. He's very light on his feet. He throws kicks very well. He moves very well. But his striking is definitely something to remember. In the fight before his UFC debut, he actually finished a guy with beautiful ground and pound, where he had handcuffed the guy's arm on the opposite side, which freed up his hammer fists, and he was able to put him out that way. It just shows how much power that Lerone Murphy is able to generate. He's still relatively young in his MMA career, 8-0-1. So he still has a ton of time to grow, and that Tukhugov fight was just great for him experience-wise. Here he is coming in against Ricardo Ramos, who 14-2 had his most recent loss to Said Nurmagomedov. They were both 12-1 going into that fight, a big fight in terms of prospects, and Nurmagomedov was able to come out on the winning end. But since then, he's been able to put together 2 straight victories over Junior Newson and Eduardo Girigori. In the most recent fight, he was able to win that fight by rear naked choke. Since coming into the UFC, he had a lot of hype on him. You know, he was on Dana White's looking for a fight where he got a second round rear naked choke. And then he finally made his UFC debut against Michinori Tanaka, won that by unanimous decision. Spinning back elbow KO of Ayman Zahabi, that one was beautiful. A split decision over Kyung Ho Kong, who personally I rate very, very heavily, and that was a very hard fight for me to choose. You guys know me, I love riding that Mr. Perfect train with Kong, but I felt like in that Ramos fight, he was definitely a little bit outmatched in terms of overall skill. Ramos does a good job in terms of keeping distance and does a really good job in with his striking, but his jiu-jitsu is very high level as well too, which is what I believe is going to give Lerone Murphy some issues. So I think that Ramos is able to, he will be able to keep the fight competitive on the feet, but I think his best path to victory would be able to initiate the grappling, get to the clinch positions, and get this fight to the ground. And I believe he'll have success doing that. Tukhugov landed plenty of takedowns on Murphy, and I'm not saying that Ramos has the same level of wrestling as Tukhugov, but Ramos does have crafty back takes, and I could definitely see him getting into some sort of a clinch position up against the cage with Murphy, and then somehow getting his back, and then sinking in the hooks, and then working for a choke of some sort. The under 2.5 is very intriguing at plus 160. I believe it's plus 160. I just want to make sure it hasn't changed since the last time I saw that. Yeah, plus 160 for the under 2.5. But I could also see an instance where Ramos is just controlling the fight from the outside, getting the fight to the ground every now and then just controlling Murphy in that aspect too. I really like Ramos, and even though he has faltered already in the UFC once, losing to Said Nurmagomedov is not the biggest deal. It's a good fight for him to get experience-wise, and I don't think it really puts him too far behind with that loss. So I still think he has a ton of potential. I think he has top 10 potential for sure. He just needs to continue to grow within the UFC. He has a great frame for the division as well too, and this is a solid fight for him to rack up some more experience, beat a solid striker in Lerone Murphy, and I believe he'll fully be able to do that. So I'm going to take Ricardo Ramos. You know what, to be on the safe side, I'll go with a decision. But yeah, I could see him outpointing Murphy on the feet and then mixing in his grappling and control to come away with the judge's decision. John Phillips versus Khamzat Chimaev. We got minus 335 for Khamzat, and we got plus 275 for John Phillips. Let's start off with the white Mike Tyson, or the Welsh wrecking machine, as they call him, because for some reason I believe people find it offensive that he calls himself the white Mike Tyson, but whatever. It's a good, it's a good explanation of what kind of fighting style John Phillips brings to the table, as he just loves throwing hooks, power shots, doesn't really throw in combinations often unless he has somebody hurt, but he likes looking for, those winging hooks, likes to put your lights out, and if he's not able to do that, more than likely he's probably going to end up losing the fight. He ended up getting a victory last time around. It was his first UFC win, 14-second finish of Alen Amedovski, but that was more so Amedovski just, losing the fight himself, losing to himself pretty much by, getting sucked into that John Phillips style of fighting. If you're going to go in there and just wing shots and hope to win a firefight against a heavy hitter like John Phillips, you're in for a rude awakening. And that's pretty much the only way that John Phillips was probably going to get a win inside the UFC, was if somebody was willing to engage in the firefight with him. He had a similar fight with Jack Marshman. Marshman a little bit more durable, but that's kind of Marshman's fight as well too. He wants to suck somebody into a John Phillips type of fight, and that's what we got. That fight ended up going to a split decision. Crazy that both guys were able to eat each other's shots. There was a little bit of respect being shown in that fight too, but yeah, that's pretty much what John Phillips wants to do. He wants to go out there and knock your head off, and if he's not able to, he'll more than likely take the L. Unfortunately for him, he's kind of a slow striker too. Outside of that first round, his hand speed starts to slow. Anybody with legit striking would be able to pretty much piece him up. But what what most fighters look to do, at least what Charles Bergh and Kevin Holland did come that third round, was if you go for the takedown, more than likely you're going to get it. And if you get the takedown and you have a decent jiu-jitsu game, you're probably going to tap him out too. That's exactly what Charles Bergh did. That's exactly what Kevin Holland did. And that's exactly what I think that Khamzat's going to be looking to do here as well. And that's what he's shown in pretty much the majority of his fights. He's a young upstart, 6-0, trains at All Stars, which is the Alexander Gustafsson training camp. Hazem Haddadi seems to have taken a huge huge coaching load off of their main head coach. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but that's somebody. Heza is somebody that we see a lot in Khamzat's corner, and he does a lot of good job or a lot of good work in terms of talking him through positions. I believe it was his last fight against. Man, I'm going to struggle to say this guy's name. Mzwandwili. Man, anyway, it's his last fight. It was from Brave CF 27. He had a huge takedown where he managed to get his opponent up and like run all the way to his corner and drop him on his back there, and then eventually locked up. I believe it was a dart stroke or an anaconda choke that he got the finish with, but. That's pretty much his style. He wants to go out there, take you down, whether it's a ground and pound or a submission. He's going to get you down and finish you off that way. Still very young in his career, but the line that I really like in this fight is the under 1.5. It's minus 150 currently, but it's probably the best bet either way. I expect Khamzat to go out there and take him down immediately, and if he's able to get that takedown, he should be able to ground and pound him and eventually work for a submission. I believe that's his best path to victory. However, if on the way in, he's a little bit, reckless per se with the takedown, John Phillips could absolutely put his lights out too, because I believe that his striking is not to the level of John Phillips. Obviously, probably not as much power either. So that's why I like the under 1.5. I think this is going to be a quick in and out fight. It's not going to be a back and forth battle. It's either Khamzat gets the takedown immediately, and then eventually works for a submission or a finish of some sort, or John Phillips catches him on the way in. So the minus 150 is a great price in my opinion, and I think one or the other happens. That's why I'm not comfortable with taking the minus 335 on the UFC newcomer. And exactly, if you guys know me, I'm not big on taking debuters anymore. So the under 1.5 at least covers Khamzat a submission, or if John Phillips pulls off a Hail Mary uppercut, times the takedown, gets a beautiful shot off, and knocks out Khamzat, the under 1.5 is there to cover both scenarios. So I don't see this fight going past the 1.5 mark. I think it's going to be Khamzat getting the takedown and pulling off the submission or a ground and pound victory. But yeah, I'm going to go with Khamzat by first round submission. But the under 1.5 is definitely the best play for this fight specifically. And unfortunately, that might be the end of it for John Phillips. They might give him another shot just due to the fact that he took this fight relatively on short notice. A different fighter than he was originally supposed to fight. Somebody that he was supposed to fight on numerous occasions before was Todor. Let me just make sure I get the kid's name right. Dusko Todorovic. He was scheduled to fight him at least 3 different times. And now in steps Khamzat on relatively short notice. And yeah, I think Khamzat gets this fight done. First round TKO or submission. Write it off pretty much a quick takedown right off the bat. Abdul Razak Alhassan versus Mounir Lazzez. We got minus 335 on Alhassan and plus 275 on the UFC newcomer Lazzez. So let's start off with Alhassan. 10-1, finally making his comeback to the UFC after he had some sexual assault allegations put up against him. He ended up beating them, so it ended up being, untrue. He was, cleared of any charges or any wrongdoing or anything like that. So he's found himself back in the UFC now. The last time he fought was actually UFC 228 when he knocked out Nico Price in 43 seconds in a wild fight. That's pretty much Nico Price, get the knockout or go out on his shield pretty much. So that was close to 2 years ago now. And I'm not sure what that really does to a guy like Abdul. I just saw a recent article that just came out saying he was contemplating suicide after the sexual assault allegations and all that stuff. And it's really got to fuck with you mentally for sure. I'm assuming he kept in shape. I'm not sure how many people technically cut him off just because they believed him or anything like that. He trains out of Fortis MMA too with Saif Sayoud and those guys, but they seem like a ride or die kind of crew. So I wouldn't be surprised if if he's still out there with those guys. Well, he is. He definitely is still with those guys. That's something confirmed. But I like to call him the welterweight Francis Ngannou, pretty much. He has 10 first-round knockouts. Those are all of his wins. His only loss was to Omari Akhmedov, who was able to stay away from all those power punches and pretty much just drowned him with his wrestling and cardio, or better cardio, I should say. That's what keeps me a little bit away from wanting to bet Razak, especially at the -335 line. This seems like a tee-up fight for him to just get back into the UFC and start to get things rolling again. But it's tough to trust a guy that the only time we've seen him outside of the first round, he's lost. And I'm not saying that Mounir is going to be the guy that's going to be able to bring him to that second round and drown him and kind of wrestle fuck him like Omari Akhmedov did. But, it just gives me a little bit of pause in terms of him being out of the cage for so long. His only real path to victory being, a knockout. But again, Mounir isn't the craziest fighter out there either. Long rangey guy making his UFC debut, has a decent jab, pretty much knows when his opponent is on the fence, or at least on the brink of breaking, and is able to really go for the kill. But against a guy like Razak, even if Razak is hurt, it seems like he's the type of guy that's going to throw back regardless. Homasi actually had him hurt in that second round too, that second fight as well. And, instead of kind of like cowering away, Razak was actually, standing his ground and throwing back, and it ended up working out for him where he landed a beautiful uppercut to put Saba away. Probably one of the crazier knockouts just due to, the way Saba was flung backwards, head bouncing off the canvas. It was very, very crazy, but that just is further in due to, what Abdul Razak brings in terms of power. My question is, and we've already seen it once in the UFC when he fought Omari, is, if he's not able to land it, what else is there for him? And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to find out what more he has, because I believe he's still going to go out there and get that first round knockout over this guy. Lazzez is very easy to hit. He doesn't seem like the fastest striker either, which leaves some openings for him. I don't think that's Alhassan is really going to cower away from anything that Lazzez is throwing at him. He's pretty much just going to wait for a counter, wait for a moment to open up. But that could also lead to a little bit of stalemating, because I think that Mounir is going to be super hesitant in terms of engaging with him as well too. Mounir obviously wants to make a good impression in his first UFC belt. I think the best way to go here, though, there may be that stalemate period, but a part of me believes that Abdul really wants to get back into the cage and really wants to, reclaim his position in that welterweight division, and he would want to go out there and just absolutely ice this guy. The only thing that's, sexy enough to me is the under 1.5. I know it's -170, but that's pretty much the path to victory for both the guys here. More so, at least Abdul Razak Alhassan. But Lazzez has a bunch of finishes on his record as well too. Again, it's weird that he's from the Team Nogueira Dubai, but it doesn't really seem like he shows too much in terms of jiu-jitsu, which that's something that they pride themselves on, the Nogueira brothers, but also the Lil Nog prides himself a little bit more on the boxing aspect of it. I like Razak here. I think he's going to put out Mounir on, within the first round. On any other card, if I didn't already have a lock of the night play, I'd probably go with the under 1.5 here. But there's already another spot on this card that I like way too much to pass up in place of this under 1.5. So the play here would be the under 1.5, even though it's a little bit juiced. But it's going to be a great welcome back party for Abdul Razak Alhassan when he puts out Mounir Lazzez in the first round. Molly McCann versus Taila Santos. We got pretty much a pick'em fight here. -120 on Molly McCann, +100 on Taila Santos. Let's start off with the, pretty inactive Taila Santos. She hasn't fought since February of last year. She was scheduled a couple times to fight Ashley Evans-Smith, Ariane Carnelosi, and Jillian Robertson. However, she had to pull out of those fights. But now here she is, finally fighting Molly McCann. Roughly about, 17 months since the last time she fought. Last time she fought, it was her first ever loss that she had incurred in her 16 fight pro MMA career. She's currently 15-1. She lost a split decision to Mara Romero Barella. However, I feel like, whichever judge scored that for Santos probably wasn't watching it correctly, because easily Mara won those first 2 rounds. The third round was clearly Santos when she was able to really start to put it together, start to defend the takedowns. It was either Mara starting to slow down, or it was more so Taila just giving it a little bit more effort, and really starting to get her shots off. She's a very well-versed striker. She moves quite well. She uses her kicks very well too. Her range management is decent whenever she's on, per se. But I'm very impressed with her striking technique. She hasn't fought the craziest competition because most of her opponents, they have less than 5 fights in her career. What is it? 1-1, 2-1. 4-3. Like, she's had just ridiculous, like, all of her opponents other than Mara and then the girl that she fought on the Contender Series, Estefany Almeida. The rest of them have like less than 3 or 4 fights. Obviously that's a little bit of a concern, but when she's fighting a girl like Molly McCann, who I believe that Molly believes in her striking a little bit more than she's actually skilled at it. I feel like Molly will, try to stand there a little bit longer than she needs to, and then start to initiate the grappling and the clinching, which is probably her best path to victory, if we're being honest. It's kind of weird that we saw such a weird game plan from Taila in that Mara fight, because I feel like she would have been able to keep a distance a little bit better, but she just pretty much gave into the clinch positions against the cage and then was easily dragged down. But I feel like, she could perform better than that. That was her first fight in the UFC, like officially, the Contender Series. We don't really call that the UFC, but this was her first legitimate fight in the UFC, and I feel like I felt like it was a little bit of a surprise for her, and there was some UFC jitters there for sure. I feel like in this fight against Molly McCann, she could definitely perform a little bit better. She's gotten the ring rust off, not the ring rust, but at least the UFC jitters out of her system. Obviously, they're going to be fighting in front of a crowdless arena, so that might have a little bit of help for her in terms of mentally getting back into the game. But she should be able to pick apart Molly McCann on the feet, in my opinion. She has a 68-inch reach compared to the 62-inch reach of McCann. 5'4" for Molly McCann, 5'6" for Taila. So she obviously has a size advantage there. She can use her kicks very well too, but she'll have to be very careful in terms of getting the back so that Molly doesn't really capitalize and get a takedown of any sort. But you got to be a little concerned if you're backing Molly here. Like, she makes some weird fight IQ decisions, like when she had that standing arm triangle choke against Danielle Belbita. God damn, I know she's fighting later in the card too. Diana Belbita, that's what it was. She had her in a standing arm triangle choke, and then like pushes off the cage into a position where Belbita was able to get on top and then obviously get out of the submission. And obviously Molly McCann did a good job of getting out of that position too. And there was another one too. I believe it was the Lipsky fight where she had her in full mount. She was trying to transition to like a mounted triangle, but it was just so hard for her to get. But like it just wasn't set up the best, and she just seems a little bit too loose on the ground. And I think that she probably won't be able to stay on top of Santos. I think Santos will do a decent enough job in terms of getting back up. But there's just so many question marks. Like I want to be confident in Taila Santos, and I think anybody at plus money against Molly McCann is a good bet. Even if it is a girl that showed an unfortunate performance last time around against Mara Romero Barella, but I think on the feet it'll be a shellacking for Taila Santos as long as she'll keep it on the feet. She as long as she maintains her range, beats up Molly McCann from the outside, really makes it difficult for McCann to drop to close the distance, she would have a really good shot of just picking her apart. I think she must have learned a lot from that Romero Barella fight, because she'll really start to put it together in that third round. Now, if she can do that for at least 2 rounds, I think she'll be able to survive anything that McCann's able to throw at her. It's tough just because I can see that path to victory for McCann with the grappling, but I just don't think that she's going to be as successful with it. Like in her last couple fights against Lipsky, against Belbita, she did a good job of like going for those takedowns with like 30 or 40 seconds left in each round to kind of steal the round away. But I think it's going to be difficult for her to steal the round when she's getting boxed up on the feet for about 4.5 minutes. And I think she has to know. McCann has to know that she has to get this fight down as soon as possible. Otherwise, she might get outpointed on the feet. And again, dealing with that reach discrepancy too, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for her to really, cruise on the feet and then initiate a takedown later in the round, which is why I'm really leaning towards Santos here. I don't mind her at the plus 100. You know what I mean? It's plus money. She's definitely the underdog, it seems, just due to the betting line. So I got to go with Santos here. I think, again, better striking. Learn some lessons from the Barella fight, hopefully. But I think I might be taking a small shot on Santos here because I just feel like a lot of people are just writing her off now just due to her unfortunate performance against Barella. But I still believe the girl has some potential. I do believe that she'll have she'll be able to string together a couple wins in the UFC, and I think this McCann one will be able to finally get her confidence back and get her back on the winning track, something that she's used to doing. But obviously, lack of competition in the past or lack of experienced competition in the past really has question marks for her. But I love what I see on tape outside of, the Barella fight and giving up those takedowns. But if she's able to clean that up, she should absolutely mollywop and, no pun intended there, but I think she'll absolutely have a good performance against McCann here on the feet to go to a decision. So I like Santos here to win by decision. I will take a very small shot on her at plus 100. As again, anybody at plus money against Molly McCann, I'll probably take it as long as they're not Priscilla Cachoeira. I think Santos should win this fight via decision. Cody Stamann versus Jimmie Rivera. We got minus 135 on Jimmie Rivera, plus 150 on the quick returning Cody Stamann. And I say quick returning because he just fought Brian Kelleher back in June, just about 5 weeks ago, where he picked up a unanimous decision victory. It was his first fight up in the UFC at 145. He looked great. He looked big. His cardio looked good too. As you guys, if you guys have been following me for a while now, you guys know that I don't really think highly of Kelleher. So, decent win for Cody Stamann, but this is going to be a real big test for him here against Jimmie Rivera, who's been in a little bit of a slump. But let's start off with Cody Stamann. Great wrestler, great cardio. His hands seem to get improving every fight. Shows off a little bit of his kicks every now and then. It's funny because he did used to train. I'm not sure if he still does, but with Darren Cruikshank, and they kind of had the similar style of striking, but obviously Cody Stamann was much more credentialed in the grappling aspect, or at least the wrestling aspect, and it's been working out pretty well for him. His only loss in the UFC has come to Aljamain Sterling, which was that wicked knee bar that Sterling was able to set up, but since then he's gone 2-0-1, the one being the Yadong Song draw, where Song Yadong actually lost a point in the first round due to an illegal knee, a blatant illegal knee, which he knew he fucked up pretty much immediately afterwards. Cody, didn't seem too fazed by it, got up, he's like, just give me my goddamn point. Referee took away the point from Yadong, and then Cody Stamann just got back to work. Stamann has decent striking. It doesn't seem like he has much power behind his shots. It's more so just to throw them out there and make his opponent kind of get intimidated by that. And I don't think that's really going to work against a guy like Jimmie Rivera. Nor do I think that Cody Stamann's wrestling is really going to come into play here either. They both share losses to Aljamain Sterling. Rivera was able to get to a decision but still lost that fight. But Sterling has this weird strength about him that he just seems a lot stronger than a lot of guys at that 135 division. Whereas I don't think Cody Stamann will have as much success in terms of stifling Jimmie Rivera in grappling or clinch situations. Jimmie Rivera coming up to 145 as well too. We're probably going to see him look a little thicker and stronger as well. So that could play a little bit of a part into this. But if you look at Jimmie's recent run, his last 4 fights, he's 1-3, but those 3 losses, Marlon Moraes, which was a quick head kick and punches knockout within 33 seconds, that was very weird, how he got caught with that and just got finished. Then he beats John Dodson. loses to Aljamain Sterling, and then loses to Petr Yan, who is obviously now the bantamweight champion. So there's nothing to really hold your head about in that aspect. But I do like Jimmie Rivera in this fight because I think he's the more refined striker. His leg kicks will definitely play a part in this fight, as I think that will slow down Cody Stamann, really, take the zest off of any takedown attempts that Cody Stamann tries to attempt, and even the striking and the blitzing attack that Cody Stamann really likes to throw, again, I think that will get really stifled by Jimmie Rivera, because I think that Rivera won't have much respect for Cody Stamann's power either. We haven't seen Cody Stamann really knock anybody out, and that's kind of the issue. What's the last time he got? He got doctor stoppage via cut in his fight before the UFC, and then before that he did get a finish as well to some guy named Bill Cameron. But with Jimmie Rivera, man, the guy throws with a lot of heat. I think the counters is where he's really going to open up, because whereas guys like Brian Kelleher, they were kind of just wincing at any type of blitz attack that was coming their way from Cody Stamann. I think Jimmie Rivera is going to stand there and kind of trade in the fire and land some big shots on Cody Stamann. And I'm a big fan of Cody Stamann, so it kind of hurts me to say that. But at that line, man, you got to think that Cody Stamann is worth a shot. At the minus 135, minus 130-ish range, I'm personally waiting for minus 130 because I believe that we'll get that. But I wouldn't mind the minus 135 either. I can get minus 132 at one of my books. Might take the shot there, maybe take a 2-unit stab or even a 1-unit stab. Just because I don't see much hope for many of the underdogs on this card either. But I think Jimmie Rivera, again, better striking. Leg kicks are going to be key and an X factor in this fight. I think he's going to be more than motivated to get back on the horse, especially after the recent tough stretch that he's on. Going up to 145 as well, even if it's temporary, I think it's very, very good for him. We're going to see an even stronger Jimmie Rivera, in my opinion. The guy sucks a lot of weight down to get down to 135, so that 145 cut for him probably won't be as bad, and he should feel even better. And it's not like cardio has ever been something that's plagued him in his career. He's obviously had good cardio throughout his fights, but I'm just really excited to see what he looks like at 145 pounds. And lastly, in that fight against Petr Yan, he was kind of holding his own. His leg kicks obviously came into play there a lot. But it's just like at the end of the first and second round, he found himself getting caught and dropped by Petr Yan. But up until those points, those fights are quite competitive. And if you're giving me that type of striking against a guy like Cody Stamann, who, striking isn't necessarily his first or his primary martial art, I think Jimmie Rivera could definitely have the upper hand in here. And I could see Cody kind of just endlessly going for takedowns, but I think he's going to start to wilt and fade, and Jimmie Rivera is really going to start to put on him with the striking, and that's where he's going to start to pull away with it. So I like Jimmie here. I more than likely will be playing him here, but I like Jimmie to win this fight. I'm going to say by decision, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him, catch Cody with something clean and put him away in either the second or the third round. So I'll go with Jimmie Rivera here, and I think he holds some solid value up to about minus 150. So if you see him anything better than that, I'm personally waiting for that minus 130, minus 135 line on one of my bookies, and I'm going to take the shot there. So I'm taking Jimmie Rivera to win this fight by decision. Tim Elliott versus Ryan Benoit. We got minus 130 on Elliott, plus 110 on Ryan Benoit. But the line that I really want to draw your attention to is the under 2.5 at plus 145. So let's start off with Ryan Benoit. It's ridiculous to me that the guy's been in the UFC for 7 years, and he's had just as many UFC fights. It kind of caught me off guard when I was looking through his record and watching some of the tape on him, that he made his UFC debut way back at the Ultimate Fighter 18 finale, November of 2013, where he lost via rear naked choke to Josh Sampo. Shout out to anybody that remembers Josh Sampo. Was didn't have too long of a UFC career, but was definitely somebody that I remember. But after that, took about a year and a half off, came back and knocked out Sergio Pettis in a fight that he was pretty much losing up until that point. And then a fight after that, rear naked choke, loss to Ben Nguyen. And he's pretty much just been trading wins and losses back and forth. Went to a split decision with Brandon Moreno, who's definitely killing shit in the flyweight division now. Was able to beat the worst fighter in UFC history in Askan Mokhtarian with the head kick in round 3. And then most recently lost a split decision to Haile Yalateng, which was a very close fight. but it did seem like Alhassan was starting to take over after that second round, and he was able to land a solid amount of takedowns on Benoit as well too, to really sway the judges his way, against Ryan Benoit. With Tim Elliott, he has a really tough task ahead of him, because Tim Elliott is a very, very solid grappler and likes to drown his opponents in the grappling realm. Benoit mainly wants to keep this fight on the feet. He has a great left kick to the body from his southpaw position. But outside of that, again, he has a ton of power in his hands. So if he catches with Tim Elliott with something, he could definitely hurt him. But I think the issue here is going to be him, keeping Tim Elliott off of him. I think Tim does a really good job in terms of closing distance. He moves very awkwardly, so it's hard to predict where he's going to be and when he's going to be there. So I think it'll be a little bit tougher for Ryan Benoit to really land a clean shot on him. And I think that Tim Elliott will be able to, clasp his hands around him, get some sort of a trip, get a double leg or whatever it is, get this fight to the ground and start swarming him with submission attempts. And then that's why I really like the under 2.5 here, because as we saw in Tim Elliott's last fight when he went up against Brandon Royval, not too long ago either. I just want to confirm the date on that. That was, the Woodley versus Burns card, May 30th. So just about a month and a half later, he's right back at it against Ryan Benoit. And if you guys remember that fight, he was aggressive right off the bat. He pretty much went for a takedown right away, got the fight down pretty easily, and was able to, go for a ton of different submission attempts. And I think in some of those, he probably would have been able to catch Ryan Benoit in. Royval was a little bit more craftier on the ground than Benoit, which is why Royval was able to get out of them and then eventually sink in his own arm triangle choke in the second round, which is at the point where Tim Elliott started to gas a little bit, start to suck wind, and it really showed that he, with him going for so many submission attempts and so many different grappling transitions, it really started to gas him. And I think that if he does that against Benoit and he's not able to get Benoit out of there, Benoit should have some success in that late second and third round to really hurt Tim Elliott and probably put him away too. That's why I like the under 2.5. I think that's going to be my dog of the night play as well. Plus 145 for two guys that pretty much consistently always look and go for the finish. I got to take the plus 145. And I think it's only at plus 145 because these guys are flyweights. And most people don't really expect these guys to go for finishes or anything like that. But Tim Elliott, Ryan Benoit, both are synonymous for always looking for that either knockout punch or the submission or crowding their opponents to eventually get them out of there. And I think that Tim Elliott's going to be the one that's successful within the first round or the second round of getting Ryan Benoit down and then locking up some sort of submission, whether it's a rear naked choke or a Darce choke or whatever it may be. I think he'll definitely be able to get that choke. But instead of taking Tim Elliott, I would rather cover my ass with the potential Ryan Benoit knockout as well, in case Tim Elliott does gas himself out. And I just can't trust myself to bet a guy like Tim Elliott. But I do like the under 2.5 because I think both guys have solid finishing opportunities. And if you're giving me plus money, I'm going to take it. And I think that Tim kind of knows that his best chance to victory here is that submission. So he's going to get Benoit down within that first round and start working for subs and really trying to confuse Ryan Benoit. And I think that he will get that sub in the first round. So I'll go with Tim Elliott to win by first round submission. But I think the bet here will be the under 2.5 or at around plus 145, plus 150. So if you guys see that at your bookie, I would highly recommend taking a shot on that prop. Time for the main event. We got Calvin Kattar versus Dan Ige, minus 300-ish. I see below minus 300 a couple places on Calvin Kattar, plus 245, plus 250 for Dan Ige. So let's start off with Dan Ige, who most recently fought when he beat Edson Barboza. That was on May 16th, so just about 2 months ago. He won that fight by split decision. We actually had a deciding split show where we went over that fight, and we actually scored it for Dan Ige. But in watching it again for research purposes for this fight, man, it was a very close fight, and you could absolutely make a case for Edson Barboza, especially in that second round. It's pretty obvious that Dan Ige won the third round, but in that second round, man, it was very close, and Edson Barboza hurt him pretty bad to the body a couple times. And we see that, Ige is slightly slower to the punch, which is why Edson Barboza was able to land a lot of good shots on him. Dan Ige is still primarily a grappler, but has been making his chops with his striking in his last, at least during his run right now. The issue with him though is, again, his speed is a little bit lacking. So a better striker or a faster striker will be able to really pick him apart, especially on the counters. And his wrestling isn't to the craziest extent where that you can count on him to always get the takedown. So those couple question marks about Dan Ige really give me pause about what his or how legitimate he actually is. You can't really discredit his recent run right now. I believe it's a 6-fight winning streak with wins over guys like Jordan Griffin, Kevin Aguilar, Mirsad Bektik, who's on a downward spiral now. And then obviously most recently Edson Barboza, who was making his featherweight debut for that fight. Barboza still looked good, even though he was coming down the weight class. But good for Danny Ige to pick up the victory there. But I'm not sold on him yet. I bet him against him when I had Mirsad Bektik. I believe I had Kevin Aguilar as well too. I'm not a Dan Ige believer. I think he's just eking these fights out. The Bektik one, I think you could have a case for Bektik to win that fight too. But the Barboza one was just really fucking close. And it's more so he doesn't really try to. Well, when he's striking, he doesn't really try to put together punches. It's more so to just get that power shot in, get that kill shot in, try to rock his opponent, and then just swarm them. It's only going to get you so far. And then when you go up against a guy like Calvin Kattar, who's much more refined on the feet, has a lot of better techniques, is the longer guy too, has a crisp and ridiculously good jab, which will probably be the X factor in this fight. I think we're going to see Ige get absolutely busted up and really... he's probably going to get finished in this fight. Shout out to the New England cartel with Calvin Kattar and Rob Font and those guys. But I think that Calvin Kattar is on the cusp of greatness. He lost a decision to Zabit Magomedsharipov, but if that was a 5-round fight, we would probably see it go a little bit differently. And say what you want about, obviously Zabit would have changed his style and his output based on the fact if it was 25 compared to 15 minutes. But still, Calvin Kattar shows that he's able to just keep going, has great cardio. He started to, he's acknowledged and started to make changes in regards to checking leg kicks, starting to throw leg kicks of his own, which were very helpful in his fight against Jeremy Stephens. Even in the Ricardo Lamas fight, he threw them a little bit. But his hands is where it's really at. And it's hilarious when he knocked out Ricardo Lamas that Joe Rogan was actually pointing out the difference in, hand technique and hand skill. And just as he was finishing his sentence, he absolutely blistered Ricardo Lamas, put him on his butt, and finished off with some ridiculous ground and pound. But man, the guy's so good on the feet. He's so technical. He's so quick. And I completely understand why he's in the minus 300 range. And honestly, he's more than likely going to be my lock of the night play, and I don't mind paying the juice on him here. Again, I'm not impressed with Dan Ige to the extent of thinking that he's going to beat a guy like Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar is obviously the A side of this matchup here. He's exciting. He puts on good performances. His only setbacks to Zabit Magomedsharipov and Renato Moicano. It seems like he addressed those issues in both of those fights. There's not too many issues in the Zabit fight. It was more so saying that he started off slow. Obviously, he started to pick it up a little bit in the Jeremy Stephens fight at the beginning and was able to get the finish in the second round. So maybe he is making use of that first round too. This is going to be his first 5-round fight in the UFC, which will be very impressive for him and very good for experience, because I believe he doesn't need to worry about starting off slow because he still has 4 rounds to potentially get the finish or at least win 4 rounds if this goes to a decision. Personally, I don't think it's going to go to a decision. I don't think Dan Ige is going to be able to withstand the power and the technique coming his way. And the under 4.5 is minus 160 kind of makes sense. I would much rather still take the shot on Calvin Kattar here. Again, a little bit juiced, but I don't mind it. He has all the technique in the world. His jab is just so freaking crisp, and he does such a good job of I believe it was the Ricardo Lamas fight, or it could have been the Jeremy Stephens fight, where he kind of gauges how far he is, not just with his jab, but also with his right hand as well too. His his power hand. He kind of paused it out there to see, okay, I'm this close to him with my power. That means my jab is just going to land pretty easily. And he's done it a couple times with a couple of his opponents. And he's just so well-versed. Great fight IQ. It's tough for me to see an instant where Dan Ige wins this fight outside of like a first round knockout. He's not a big leg kicker, which is probably one of the flaws that we've seen from Kattar in the past. But even that, I think he started to really work on, especially when you have a guy like Rob Font in your corner who's a great kicker and Muay Thai practitioner himself. You got to think that he's learned a thing or two from him. But yeah, I think Kattar's on a new wave right now. I think he felt that, what the top feels like when he went up against a guy like Zabit Magomedsharipov, and he's trying to elevate his game even more. So I love me some Calvin Kattar here. I think he's going to win this fight probably by third or fourth round TKO. But Dan Ige is just not going to be able to stand on, or, hang on the feet, nor do I think he's going to be able to get this fight to the ground consistent enough or good enough to at least, pull away with the victory or pull off a submission. We've seen Kattar get taken down by Ricardo Ramos. Kattar was easily right back up to his feet. I think Chris Fishgold got him down as well. Kattar did a good job of like shrimping to the cage and getting right back to his feet. So he has good knowledge in terms of what he needs to do to get back to his feet, and doesn't really settle on the bottom either, which is where Dan Ige kind of thrives. But even that, Dan Ige doesn't do the best in terms of keeping fighters down. So yeah, I like Calvin Kattar here. I will be paying the juice on him. I just want to wait. Maybe even on weigh-in day or something like that, we'll see the line get a little bit closer. I'm not 100% sure. I want to try to. I'm aiming for that minus 275, but I don't mind taking the shot over my 300 to 310 or 315. I don't mind it. I just think that Kattar is the pretty the definition of a lock of the night on this card, which is why I'm more than happy to play him. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Calvin Kattar to win this fight. And there's your breakdown for UFC Fight Island 1. If you guys agree with me, disagree with me, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be gladly debating you guys there. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitter at MMA LOTN. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm always checking the Twitter stream. Every now and then I'll come in and look at the comment section below for YouTube, but the best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter, so make sure you guys check me out there. And if you guys haven't subscribed yet, help me out. I'm at like 918 or 920 right now. I'm trying to get to 1,000 before the end of the summer, and I think it's very much attainable. So just help a brother out. If you guys are watching my videos on a weekly basis, just hit the subscribe button, and you guys will get a notification every time the episode drops as well too. So that definitely helps. Yeah, that's pretty much it. For all my bits, check out the Twitter account, check out the website, mmalotn.ca. Haven't placed anything as of yet, but I will be probably after the weigh-ins, or at least early fight day as well too. So make sure you guys check that out. And then the podcast for UFC Fight Island 2, which is the Saturday card. I believe that's the Figueiredo and Benavidez 2 card. I believe that podcast will come out either Wednesday night or Thursday evening. So make sure you guys check out that and stay tuned. A ton of fights to break down. Your man's going crazy trying to study 30 to 40 fights in the span of a couple days. So I'm banging them out. And again, lastly, they drop nice and early on my Patreon. So if you guys can't wait for the podcast to come out, check out the Patreon and I'll hook you guys up there. That's about it. Enjoy the fights. Let's make some money, and I'll see you guys for the next episode.